Yorktown, a siege battle would take place to end the main armed conflict in the American Revolution. General Washington and General Rochambeau would defeat General Cornwallis and accept his surrender. How did a ragtag army defeat a world superpower with both its own professional soldiers, hardened mercenaries, and possibly the finest navy in the world? There are several reasons. One reason that the U.S. Army still studies today is the logistical victory General Washington managed by keeping both General Clinton in New York and General Cornwallis in Yorktown unaware of his intentions. Another reason would have to include the miscommunications between General Clinton and General Cornwallis that almost put each army in a state of immobilization. Yet the other two main reasons, General Washington's military tactic called the Fabian strategy and the often overlooked naval battle known as the Battle of the Capes, will be the main focus of our journey today.
February 17th, 1781, the Norfolk Chronicle writes, North America continues to be the grave of Englishmen, the repository of English money, the source of Great Britain's troubles, and it is to be feared. We are exactly in the place where it was going to be feared the most, Yorktown, Virginia. Behind me is Redoubt 9. To get here to Redoubt 9, we have to make a couple of steps backwards. First, we must see that Nathaniel Greene and Lafayette, who were in charge of the military for the American Continentals down here in Virginia, had been so influenced by Washington's tactics that they began to continue to fight in the manner in which he did, giving ground and taking casualties away from the British, as once they arrived here in Virginia, their task was to take the government in Virginia. First to Richmond, where the House of Delegates was, pursuing it from Richmond all the way up to Charlottesville. The whole time, Lafayette and Greene would not stand and fight, following backwards and backwards, submitting territory so that they could get time in which they could pick the battle they wanted to. Benedict Arnold, in charge of the troops, was getting angrier and angrier as he pursued them deeper and deeper into Virginia territory, not realizing that he was stretching out his lines of supply, and which Nathaniel Greene and Lafayette could then cut him off from the rear, which they began to do. This made the troops then, for the British, fall back into Yorktown, ready to do battle there instead of extenuating their supply lines. It was here that Washington, with Rochambeau, would now have his troops come down in time for the last siege. They set up siege lines not far from here to the west, and it was taking these redoubts that they were able to, the French taking Redoubt 9 behind me and Redoubt 10 to my right, that they were able to set up their final siege line and take
Let me start out by talking about Washington's military strategy. It becomes very obvious early in the war that Washington cannot win the war. And so his strategy becomes one of preserving his army and letting the British lose the war. Now, the British cannot afford to lose the war. The British have to win the war in order to keep the colonies. Washington just wants to make sure he does not lose. The British follow a policy of trying to capture the American army. They actually take Boston, they take Philadelphia, they take New York. The capture of major cities does nothing for ending the American Revolution. Washington follows a policy that I would call a Fabian strategy, based on a Roman general, Fabius Maximus. I think there's more to that name, but anyway, Fabian Maximus fought Hannibal and followed a strategy of pulling his army off the battlefield when it looked like things were going bad and preserving the army to fight another day. Washington follows the same strategy, knowing he's not going to win every battle. In fact, if you look at Washington's war record, he's in 12 major battles. He loses 8 of them. Okay? That's not a great record for a general. Okay? However, he never loses the army. Over a 8.5-year period, the Continental Army is still there, and it basically becomes the symbol of the American Revolution, and it drives the British nuts, particularly in the first 5 years of the war. The British chase Washington all over New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, but they never capture him, and they never capture the army. The army exists. That's one of the reasons the British decide to go south after 1780. They're fed up with trying, the war in the north is basically a stalemate. Not only Washington follows that policy, but Washington's most trusted senior general, Nathaniel Greene. And one of the prime examples is the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, where Greene actually inflicts twice as many casualties on the British, but pulls his army off the battlefield. And so if you look in the history books today, Guilford Courthouse is written as a British victory. However, it is really a British loss because they took twice as many casualties there as the Americans. And in fact, Charles Fox, on the floor of Congress, announced another British victory like this will ruin the British Army.
Many Americans are aware that Yorktown was the site of a siege during the American Revolution, but few are aware of the battle at sea that made the siege successful. The sea action was unusual in that no American fought in the battle. Only French and British were involved in a fleet of 28 ships of the line. The French blockaded the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and the York River, cutting off British naval access to Yorktown. Admiral Thomas Graves, commanding a British battle fleet of 19 ships of the line from New York, approached the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay on September 5th. When the British ships were sighted, the French Admiral Francois-Joseph de Grasse ordered his fleet to attack. The ships sailed on a nearly parallel course. Cannon roared. By sunset, sails, masts, and rigging cluttered the decks of the disabled British ships. While the French fleet had suffered minor damage, the fleets drifted south but did not resume fighting. This sea battle, known as the Battle of the Capes, helped ensure British defeat at Yorktown several days later. British Admiral Graves returned to New York to repair his ships, and the French fleet returned to the Chesapeake and resumed its blockade, there joined by a small French fleet commanded by Admiral Francois de Barrage, who recently sailed from Rhode Island with much of the French artillery.
1 month before the land battle, Admiral de Grasse arrives here August 30th. Surrender is October 19th, so de Grasse is arriving here about 2 months before. He comes up with a huge fleet. 28 of them are warships. The British are sending a fleet down from New York the very same day that de Grasse arrived here, August 30th. It takes the British 5 days to come down. They turn into Chesapeake Bay, are completely surprised to see the French fleet here. French fleet sends 24 of their 28 warships out to meet 19 British warships. And on September 5, 1781, we have the largest sea battle of the American Revolution taking place about 20 miles from where we are here in Yorktown, right off current-day Virginia Beach. And not one American takes part in this battle. Largest sea battle in the American Revolution, no Americans at all. Battle goes on for about 2.5 hours. After that, the two fleets break apart. The French have suffered 4 ships seriously damaged out of their 24 and suffered about 200 casualties. The British, out of 19 ships, 6 ships seriously damaged and about 300 casualties. The two fleets break apart, and then for the next 2 days, they drift to the south and they're assessing damages. And after 2 days, the British decide, we can't continue this. Too many ships damaged. Admiral Graves, British Admiral, turns around and heads back for New York. Admiral de Grasse turns around and heads back for the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. Unfortunately for Cornwallis, who is sitting here in Yorktown, on the British fleet were 5,000 redcoats, plus additional supplies and artillery for Cornwallis. Now with the British heading back to New York, Cornwallis is completely isolated. The French now are in control of all the waters down here in the Virginia area, and Cornwallis cannot be resupplied and he can't be rearmed. And that is 1 month before the land battle, and Cornwallis' fate is sealed well before the battle starts here in Virginia.